Hi everybody, welcome to this video on natural selection. Before you start the video, you need to have a handout with the fill in the blank notes that go with this video. You can get it in class or on our teams. By the end of this video, I hope you'll be able to describe the process of natural selection and what conditions need to be in place for it to happen. So we're starting off with some terms for you to understand. The first one is species. A species is a group of related individuals that can reproduce with each other to produce viable offspring. So for example, dogs, even though there's many different breeds of dogs, they're all one species because they can breed with each other. However, dogs and cats are two different species because you can't breed a cat and a dog together and have a dog-cat. Usually this is because there's different numbers of chromosomes in different species. So an example of a species is coyote. Their species name is Canis latrans. It's a species of canine native to North America. We usually call this species coyote. The next word is population. So the population is all the members of one species in an area. So for example, we could say the coyote population in Stanley Park. The population can be a bigger area too. You could say the Western Canadian population of coyotes. And we're going to talk about individuals. So one single organism is an individual. So for example, this one coyote would be an individual. So we've got species is quite big, population's a bit smaller, individual is just one organism. A mutation happens to the DNA of an individual in a species. So just one individual will have this mutation at first. Over time, if the mutation causes a trait that is heritable and gives an advantage so that that individual can survive and reproduce better than others, the trait will become more common in the population or the group that that individual would breed with. Natural selection is the process of traits of a population changing over many generations because some individuals are better at surviving and reproducing in their current environment. So remember from the last video on adaptations that traits provide an advantage in their specific environment and maybe not in all environments. Evolution is a term for the change in the characteristics of a population or species over time. So natural selection is the process of certain traits becoming more common because they give an advantage. Evolution is the result of that change in the population or in the species. So for natural selection to happen, there needs to be 4 conditions that are met. And the way to remember this is the acronym VIDA, V-I-D-A. So you need variation, inheritance, differential survival and reproduction, and adaptation in order for there to be natural selection. So the first one, variation, comes from either different combinations of genes or from mutations. So for example, in this beetle population, your variation is in their color. So you've got this brown one was a mutation. These kittens all have the same mother, but they have different coat colors because they inherited different combinations of genes from their parents. So that's the first one, variation. Second up is inheritance. So the trait has to be passed from parent to offspring, or it must be heritable. So for example, our brown beetle trait can get passed to the offspring, or here's a pedigree showing a trait that is colored black being passed down. So the trait that you are selecting for has to be heritable or passed from parents to offspring. The third one is differential survival and reproduction. This is important. Differential means there's different rates of or different levels of survival and reproduction. So in the population, some individuals will live longer and have more babies, and that needs to happen for there to be natural selection. So some organisms are better at surviving and reproducing than others, and remember from the adaptation video, this is called a selective advantage. And this differential survival and reproduction, or different levels of survival is driven by several types of what's called selective pressures. Selective pressures are environmental conditions that give some individuals an advantage over others. So I'm going to go through selective pressures. So the first selective pressure is competition. So individuals in the same species compete for resources like food or space. So for example, plants might grow taller so that they have access to the most sunlight, and they will actually grow out and cast shade on the plants below them so that those plants don't grow too close and crowd out and steal their nutrients. Another example of competition is that cheetahs hunt individually, so the faster cheetahs are going to be able to catch more gazelle than the slower cheetahs. There's a special type of competition called sexual selection, and that's competition for mates. So some individuals have a trait that give them an advantage in attracting more mates than others. So for example, peacocks grow these big, huge tails, which would actually make them more vulnerable to predators, but it helps them reproduce more often. Even if they might not survive as often, helps them have more babies. So that's sexual selection. Same thing with like a mating dance or any kind of mating ritual would be a result of sexual selection or competition for mates. The next selective pressure is predators. So individuals who can better avoid being eaten will survive and reproduce more often. So in this example, brown beetles camouflage better on the brown trees. So the green ones are going to get eaten more often. The brown ones are going to survive better. Gazelle that can run really fast could outrun cheetahs more often, so they're going to live longer and have more babies. Plants that have spikes or toxins are also there to avoid predation by animals that might want to eat them. So camouflage is driven by predators as a selective pressure. The last selective pressure I'm going to talk about is a changing environment. So the environment might slowly change to have different conditions. So temperatures are changing because of climate change, weather, change in water or ground cover, or natural disasters all could drive changes in the population. So for example, salmon are migrating earlier in the year to avoid warm waters because of climate change and rivers getting warmer. So they're actually, if they used to spawn in August, now they might be spawning in June or July because the river will be cooler. A mudslide could take out trees with short roots on a mountain. That would leave the trees with long roots behind, and it would select for trees with longer roots. There's also a lot of cases of animals who are changing color because they are trying to camouflage in less and less snow. So for example, here is a mountain hare, and in the winter, mountain hare will have a white coat, but as their winters are getting warmer and there's not as much snow for them to blend into, they are more and more becoming kind of a brown color that blends in better with shrubs and rocks that are not covered in snow. So over time, the population is changing to look more like this and less like this. The last requirement for natural selection is adaptation. So the traits have to help a population survive better in their environments for natural selection to act on them. Over time, the number of individuals in the population with the helpful trait will increase. And after many generations, the allele for the helpful trait will become more common, and this is called evolution. So for example, our brown beetles are left to have more babies, and more of the population is going to be brown. These are the Galapagos finches, which have beaks that are adapted to eat different types of seeds in different environments. So that's it for natural selection. I hope that was interesting. If you have any questions, please ask me in class or write it on Teams. Have a great day.